Good morning, everybody. I will be starting in about 2-3 minutes, so please take your seats so that we can start our last day. Thank you very much. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Please take your seats. I'm now starting the morning of the last day. So my intention this morning is first to go through the ComDocs. So this means first a review of significant trade, that is COM3, then captive breeding, COM4, and then sharks, COM5. And finally, I also would like then to look at SUM3, so the summary record of yesterday. It is online, and I will take it up late in the morning, and I will give you, before we look at it, a couple of minutes to go through so that we can finish that document as well. And then I will go on with the rest of our agenda, which is regional reports, any other business, and then closing of the session. Okay? Then we will now turn to document AC32-COM3 on review of significant trait in specimens of Appendix 2 species. I would like to make some comments on the process. It is falsely often perceived as being from the outset a punitive measure. It is not. It is supposed to support parties to have functioning and working non-detriment finding processes. So if a party is selected for the stage 2 and does have, as is requested for any trait in Appendix 2 species, an NDF, then all it has to do is present that NDF, and then we will check it, and if it's working, we are convinced that it is supports sustainable use of that species, then the party is released. If it is not, then it's the task of the Animals Committee to support the party in getting there, in having, in the end, an NDF that is working. So, and only if that process doesn't lead to an NDF, the party does not collaborate, or the data are not sufficient, it's then that the Animals Committee submits that case to the Standing Committee for any further actions. So it's a long process where it is not punitive, it's supposed to be supporting parties in having a working NDF. On the other hand, if we are looking at the data and we have levels of trade that we are not sure whether they are sustainable, and the party does have an NDF, but still the numbers are high and we are worried about that trade, then a party may be included in the process of review of significant trait anyway, even though it does have an NDF. But all it then has to do is to present that NDF to the committee, and we will have a look at it, and if we are satisfied, we then release the party from that process. So just to make clear that the whole process we are looking at here is not punitive. It is in order to support parties to have a sustainable use of the wildlife. Okay, that just as some introductory words, because we will have some discussions around that in the coming minutes, maybe an hour, I don't know, we will see. So with this, I would open the floor to the co-chairs of this working group to present the document. So, co-chairs, you have the word. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We have been co-chairing this working group together with Siquio Benitez from North America. It was a large working group. If I've counted well, we had 4 members of the Animals Committee, 40 parties, and 44 observers. We have had very useful discussion and have managed to identify 26 country species combinations which deserve further review. These include 1 mammal country species combination, 2 country species combinations for birds, 6 for reptiles, 14 for sharks and rays, and 3 for invertebrates. Unfortunately, we were not able to find a full agreement in the working group, so there are still 4 countries who claim that in case of 6 country species combinations, there is either a reporting error or some additional information which should be considered. So we have invited these countries to provide any additional information they would have available and to present it to the plenary so that the plenary can decide whether to keep or leave out these combinations. So, as you said, the outcome of the working group is in the document which has been made available, and yeah, we would like the plenary to consider that report. Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know whether my co-chair wants to add something.
Yes, thank you very much. I was in crisis because my computer didn't work. First, I'd like to thank my co-chair, Dagmar, and the secretariat and the participants and interpreters. The working group was attended by representatives of 88 parties and organizations that met in 2 sessions during the morning and the afternoon. You know the mandate to review information contained in the annexes and also to recommend a limited number of the species country combinations of the greatest concern for inclusion to stage 2, as you explained. And then there are 2 main conclusions or recommendations from the group. In accordance with paragraph 1B of resolution 12.8, the working group recommends the following species country combinations for inclusion in stage 2 of the review significant trait that include 13 species for a total of 26 species country combinations. Those species are, I will just name them, Balearica regolorum for the Democratic Republic of Congo, Falco cherub for Jordan, Kinix homeana for Ghana, Phyton regius for Ghana, Benin, and Togo, Sieven ronquiella crassicolis from Indonesia, Carcarinus longimanus from Colombia, Kenya, Senegal, Oman, and Yemen, Mobula spp for Sri Lanka, Sphyrna lewini for Mexico, Indonesia, China, Kenya, Nicaragua, Sri Lanka, and Yemen, Sphyrna mocaran for Mexico, Oloturia noblis for Indonesia and Yemen, Pandinus spp for Democratic Republic of Congo, Moscus mosciferus for the Russian Federation, and Testudo horsfieldii for Uzbekistan. From this table, as my colleague mentioned, 4 parties on 6 species country combinations did not agree with the conclusion of the working group. For 3 of these species country combinations on marine species, the working group was not able to reach to a conclusion due to the absence of experts that were meeting in parallel at the working group on sharks. Also, there's additional recommendations concerning agenda item 4.2 that you can see on the report. This goes for Saiga tartarica, Ukraine, where the working group requests Secretariat to follow up with Ukraine on its captive breeding facilities for this species, even it's not a range state of this species, and report any issues of concern to the standing committee. So it's not in our package. Also for Trionyx triungis from Ghana, the working group requests the Secretariat to invite Ghana to present a case study on this species at NDF workshop to be held later this year. Also, Indo Testudo forstenii from Indonesia. The working group agreed not to include these species country combinations in the review following Indonesia's commitment to the publication of a 0 quota for next year. Psittacus eritacus from Democratic Republic of Congo. The working group note reports of illegal trade of the species and requests to refer the matter to the standing committee. And finally, Monodon monoceros from Greenland. The working group note that the species has been removed from the significant trade at COP19 on the basis of a temporary ban. An NDF will be needed for trade to resume, and the group note that trade on this species has resumed and requests the Secretariat to follow up on the NDF requirement. So it's not included in the package. Those are the main conclusions for the working group, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe and North America, for this report. So with this, I open the floor for any comments and suggestions. I see the nomenclature specialist has asked for the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, co-chairs for the work of the working group for this report. Just a tiny little clarification that I would like to hear either from you or Indonesia. For Indonesia, Forstenai, it mentions the commitment to a publication of a zero quota from next year. Is that a zero quota for wild collected specimens or for all specimens? Thank you.
I turn back to the chairs. What was the discussion there? Or was it open? My understanding is if there's a zero quota just like that, it is for anything. Unless specified, it is only for wild taken.
That's my understanding as well, but I'm aware that Indonesia has captive breeding for the species, and since the review of significant trade only looks at wild collected specimens, this may be something for Indonesia to clarify.
So in the working group, there was no specification of that? Okay.
Maybe you can ask Indonesia to clarify.
So I would turn to Indonesia. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to confirm that we will set up zero quota from wild start next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia, for that clarification. So we will record that accordingly. I see DRC has asked for the floor, so DRC, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the Secretariat and the chairs of the working group for having prepared the report. DRC made a statement concerning Balearica regularum and Pandinus, and expressed its concerns about a paragraph in COM 3. With respect to Balearica and Pandinus, DRC would like these species to be deleted. I will commit to a zero quota for Balearica regularum and Pandinus starting next year for species taken from the wild. And I would like that to be mentioned in the meeting report, that these species are being withdrawn from significant trade due to a zero quota. Furthermore, I'm concerned about paragraphs under the additional recommendations of the same document concerning Psittacus erythicus for the DRC. I don't believe that the paragraph reflects the discussion which took place in the working group. It was not noted. The DRC was a member of the working group, and I do not believe that the working group noted this issue regarding Psittacus erythicus. I find this paragraph strange, and I would like the other members of the working group to confirm or deny, or confirm or tell us that this, if this issue is really considered by the working group. The report needs to be a faithful reflection of the discussions of the within the working group. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, DRC. We have two issues here to look at. So you said you would ask for a zero quota. To my knowledge, you have written to the Secretariat to publish a zero quota for Pandinus SPP and Balearica regularum, and until an NDF is being presented. Is that correct?
Yes, I can confirm that. I have written to the Secretariat to request a zero quota to be published while awaiting the presentation, the submission of an NDF. So this will be starting next year. Thank you.
So thank you very much. With this information, I would first go on these two species, and then I will come back to the other issue. So I'm asking the proponents of putting the RC on the process. To my knowledge, if there is a zero quota with the caveat that it will only be lifted if an NDF is being presented, is sufficient safeguard that we can take this species country combination out of the list. I see Europe.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the Secretariat for clarification what this, in which form this presentation will take place, whether it will be presented to the Secretariat or made available on the website, and whether there would be any consideration of the quality of the NDFs by the Animals Committee before any trade could resume. So what would be the procedure then for changing the zero quota in resuming trade? Thank you.
Thank you. Secretariat, did you want to respond?
Yes, excuse me, thank you. It's not specified in the instructions, but I think that it would make sense that it would need to be assessed by the Secretariat and the Chair of the Animals Committee before it would be accepted. Yeah.
So I would propose to add this to our conclusions, that this is the process we will follow. So I think with this, yes, Israel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to bring up another species. Is this the time or not yet? Okay, thank you.
We are still with this case, so with yes, United States of America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had similar question as the European representative. One thing we would, for both the Indo-Testudii foresti has the same thing with the zero quota. It says next year. We would like next year to be 2024, right? Because when you look at this in the record, you don't know what the next year is. And also, based on what you just said, that the NDF would be reviewed by the Secretariat in consultation with the Animals Committee Chair. We'd like that reflected. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. We will make sure that this is reflected, and we will also add the year so that it is clear when this is going to happen. Now, in relation to this, yes, I see France. France, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. It was simply to say that for Pandinus SPP, there's a taxonomic issue that needs to be resolved. This is why we decided to adopt SPP, and France has offered its support because we have specialists on these species. We think that there's a mixture of old and new systems that is making it difficult to name these species, so we've offered our assistance to the nomenclature expert, and we will quickly submit a report to him so that we can clarify the situation with the former taxonomic names, synonymy, the new taxa that came out of the splitting exercise, so that everyone can see clearly which species, or at least which populations, are in trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz, for this offer. I think this is well noted that we have now in the list SPP, but there needs to be some clarification which species it really concerns, because at the moment this is apparently not clear. That's why we put SPP, but I think it needs clarification. So if, with the support of the nomenclature specialists and France, that this could be clarified. Yeah. Okay, I see DRC, you have asked for the floor. I'm not quite finished with the points that you raised, so maybe I will come back to you after we have clarified the second point. So with these two species, country combination Balearica regulorum, and Pandinus spp. I think we can remove them from this table. The second topic that was raised by DRC is that the working group noted reports of illegal trade, so I would turn to the chairs of the working group to see their view how this topic was treated and handled, and whether the working group noted the document, which is to say it has heard it, it has seen it, it hasn't given any specific view, it just noted these concern. So I would give the floor to the chairs of the working group to clarify this.
Yeah, after we passed through the table of Annex 2, there were a number of species that different participants suggest to analyze, and this includes the case of Psittacus erytacus for Congo. And that is when we analyze that it's not a matter of sick trade directly, so it's more related to a different issue. That's why the suggestion was to transfer this to the standing committee. Unless also the Secretariat can help me if they remind more details. This was part of the cycle we had. There were a number of species, and that's why the second recommendations names all these ones that were suggested after we passed through the table. Thank you.
Okay, so if the way you describe is this is a typical case where the working group noted the concerns and said we will transfer transfer that issue to the competent body, which is the standing committee. So it sounds like it's a clear example of to note something and send it to the next body that deals with it. I see anybody else wanting to take the floor, and then I will come back to DRC. Okay, DRC, you have the floor.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd really like the committee to consider this issue seriously. This way of attracting attention to this issue is suspicious. My country feels it's suspicious. We were at the working group meeting, and singling out the gray parrot here, as is done in the document, is, I think, a bit suspect. It's as if there were a lobby, a suspicious lobby behind this. This issue was not discussed. What's this doing in the meeting report?
I don't have English translation on my headphones.
Okay.
Can you hear us now, Chairman? Can you hear us? Can somebody please raise their hand if they can hear English? Thank you very much. Okay, so some problem with the chair's headset. Chairman, I was saying it's suspicious to single this issue out when the issues that were voiced about the DRC were acknowledged. We were in the working group, and this, I feel, is a very strange paragraph in the COM document. I also wanted to remind you that I followed the discussions on Balearica regulorum and the zero quota that we will commit to in 2024. I think the same comment should apply to the other countries which requested zero quotas, and that this not be specific to DRC. This should be a general concern regarding zero quotas requested by countries before they submit their NDF, that this not be applied only to the DRC. And I repeat that I find the paragraph on Psittacus erytacus suspicious. Thank you.
Okay. The Secretary just informed me that DRC is in the Article 13 process already, and one of the issues that is being looked at is trade in Psittacus erythecus. So it would only repeat what is being done anyway. And on the other hand, if there are concerns about illegal trade, they should be substantiated, and if you have information, clear information on that, then this information can be transmitted to the Secretariat. But in view of the fact that DRC is already in the process of Article 13 and Psittacus erythecus is part of that process, I don't think we need to repeat these concerns because they are already being dealt with. So with your agreement, I think we can strike that comment as it is already being considered in another process. Do I see opposition to that? Chairs?
Well, since this is not a matter related to sick trade, just reminded, I believe it was UK who suggested to discuss the species. It was a discussion, and this was the conclusion. So that is not related to sick trade, and that's a decision. But we're open. But it was discussed. Thank you.
Would UK agree to have it removed as this matter is already dealt with in a different process which has quite other implications?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, the UK flagged it because obviously it had come up in the UNEP WCMC analysis, and there'd also been these reports coming out which indicated seizures and movements, large movements of birds across the border from DRC. So that was the reason why we sort of raised it. So I'm happy for it to be dealt with, obviously under the compliance mechanism through the Standing Committee. I don't know whether it's worth noting that there is sort of trade being reported, that whether it is worth still having a note that the Animals Committee remains concerned over trade in this species from DRC, but we'll leave that to the Animals Committee to decide. Thank you.
So the proposal of the UK is to have a different wording, saying that the working group noted noted trade in Psittacus erythecus from Democratic Republic of the Congo, and remains concerned about this trade. I see Conservation Force. You have the floor.
Sorry, Chair.
Excuse me, Conservation Force. I had in Indonesia first,
yes.
So sorry.
Yes.
I will come back to you. Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the issue of CITES erythecus, we would like to support the RC position on this. We should not decide something that is outside the mandate of the working group. In addition, RST should respect the criteria high volume of trade and lack of scientific information, or NDF, provided by the relevant country. We appreciate the Chair for its consideration, since the inclusion of this may create not a good precedent for this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I see Conservation Force. No, I see another party. I see Namibia asking for the floor.
Thank you, Chairperson. Namibia was also a member of the working group on significant trade review. We also do not have a recollection of a discussion or a conclusion which led to the additional recommendation on Psittacus erythecus. And we therefore are in support of the DRC that that paragraph should be deleted. We are asking the committee to consider deleting that paragraph. And additionally, we also are not in support of the suggestion by the UK. We feel that is just a change of words, but it will exactly say the same, and we therefore do not support that. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Namibia. United States, you have the floor, and then Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This comment is a general comment in relation to the comment made by Indonesia on the process. It is common in RST that we focus on the NDFs. However, in those discussions, when we're having it, it usually happens in the next stage, but what we're seeing is this discussion happening now in stage 1. If we find there is an issue of illegal trade and it is a compliance issue, if you look at past RST working group reports that Animals Committee has issued, we are basically have raised them, noted them, and referred them to the Standing Committee. In this particular example for the African gray, we are satisfied with the Secretariat's response that they are already in compliance. But I wanted to address Indonesia's comment that this was not appropriate in the RST process, and it is appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can stop here, because in my view it is quite obvious that we do have a process that addresses concerns on illegal trade in the African grey, in Psittacus erythacus, that is being led at the moment by the Secretariat, and we do not need to include this now in this report. I also agree with the United States that we, in the process of RST, we are requested to report if we, in the process, see matters that are of concern for the Standing Committee, that we flag these and transfer them to the Standing Committee, to the appropriate body. But in this case here, we do have a process that already addresses the issue, so I don't think we need to repeat it in that document. So my suggestion would be not to include that matter in the report. I'm looking at committee members, whether you agree with my proposed way forward. I see nodding. Okay, so I think that's what we will go about. If it's still on this matter, conservation force, I think I have closed the matter, so okay, thank you very much. So I think this closes the matters around DRC. The case is selected for DRC and the recommendation in the document. Now I would like to open the floor for other matters. Yes, I see Colombia, you have the floor. Colombia, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I wanted to thank the co-chairs for their presentation of the report on the working group on the review of significant trade. And I'd like to highlight a few procedural points, if I can give the floor to my colleague who has some substantive points then afterwards. We'd like to highlight the fact that the co-chairs of the group have expressed in the room that there was not agreement on various species and species country combinations. But our attention is strongly drawn, Chair, to the fact that in the text of the report of the working group, if we look at the recommendations, that reality isn't reflected in the text. The recommendations, and I'll read them, so in accordance with paragraph 1b of Resolution Conf 12.8, the working group recommends the following species country combinations for inclusion in stage 2 of the review of significant trade. And it includes a table where, as has been indicated by the co-chairs of the working group, there is not agreement on various country species combinations. We don't understand how that has arisen, and we'd like the correction to be made because the written report does not reflect the reality of the discussions in the working group, where recommendations were not able to be issued on some country species combinations. And we would like that in addition to the additional discussion on these species be held now, we'd like the corrections to be made to the report, because this is the archive of the convention and will show the developments of those discussions. And unfortunately, at this point, what is written in the document is factually incorrect. So I would now like to give the floor to my colleague to cover other substantive issues. Thank you.
I understand your concern, because if you read it in 2 years, you would not see that there has been disagreement on certain cases. So it might be maybe that we flag those cases where there was disagreement with a asterisk or with brackets, so to make it clear which cases were contentious. That might be that would clarify what you mentioned, Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. The more wide problem is not that. The problem is that if you look at the way it is written, it says it recommends, and that's not what the working group did. The working group was not able to issue recommendations on those species country combinations. So an asterisk would not be a solution to the problem, but what would resolve the problem is to say that they recommend the combinations where there was no disagreement, and that they then highlight those on which a recommendation could not be issued because consensus was not reached. So I think it's the use of the word recommends with this table that follows it is incorrect.
We could address this issue by having 2 tables, one saying which were agreed, and a second table where we would note where the working group did not reach consensus, but would like the plenary to have a look at. That could be a solution for your problem.
Sí, señor presidente.
Yes, Chair, that would be right, and that'd be good. To refer to a specific matter on Carcharanus longimanus, would you like us to do that now or wait until later?
I will come back to you whenever we have solved the issue of the presentation of the results. I see Europe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I must admit that in the conclusion of the working group, we have indicated that we would, in the document, state that decision on these 4 species from 6 countries was not taken by unanimity in the working group, and I think this was omitted. So I would suggest to proceed along the lines you have proposed, so to put asterisks to these species country combinations and indicate in the footnote that decision on these species country combinations was not taken by unanimity, because as far as I remember, there is no requirement that the working groups agree by unanimity. So there was really strong wish in the group to keep those, but we wanted to highlight that some parties had different opinions. So this could be resolved with the asterisks and footnote, maybe. So.
Well, I did propose a second option to have 2 tables. Yes, I think that would make it even clearer that we really have a set of ones where there was large agreement, where everyone was okay, and a set of combinations where there was not agreement. Yeah. Yes, North America.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, to support this clarification, actually the mandate we receive from you, as is included in the report, is to recommend. That's why the header of the section before the table is named recommendations, because that's the mandate we receive. So far the table is what the different discussions get to the list we have and the countries. Of course, there was no agreement in many cases, including my country, but we are reflecting the different discussions. I believe both suggestions either to mark with an asterisk which combinations were not accept or result of a consensus, that can be a way to reflect, because this is a report. And I don't want to open the discussions on the previous topic, because we dealt with that. And this is the report of what happened. Colombia is right that maybe we need to flag those combinations where there was not an agreement. But most of the table combinations, it was an agreement of the group. So either to flag with an asterisk where there is no consensus can help, and a footnote, or to have a second table indicating where there is no agreement, and then we can open. I mean, this is one document, the report, and another is a discussion here in the plenary and the results. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, when I think of having two tables, it's in the discussions quite often the parties concerned are not in agreement, but the whole rest is in agreement. So where do we put then these cases? I think it will be quite difficult and challenging to really separate clearly those cases where there was large agreement and where there was only little agreement. So I think it would create quite some problems if I think it through, if we have two tables. Europe?
Thank you very much. This is exactly what I wanted to say, because, of course, many range states are hesitating having their case reviewed. So I think we would set up a dangerous precedent for the future by creating two tables of those who agree and disagree. So if there are parties this time who strongly disagree with the conclusions, I think that would be the best to put asterisks to that particular species country combination, but keep one table, because there was no discussion on two tables in the working group.
But you know, even then,
yeah, even then. So
where is the limit where we would put an asterisk,
okay,
and where we wouldn't? So I see practical problems here to deal with the issue of parties not being in agreement with this decision of a working group. I think I'm having problems seeing their solution. I see Senegal has asked for the floor, then I will go back to Colombia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think that in our working group, we didn't always have a consensus. Some countries accepted certain items, others were more hesitant, and we asked, and others asked for the combinations to be kept in. There are two countries who aren't even present, who were chosen and who are not in the room here to state their case. Those countries are not able to say yes or no about the choice of their species country combination. They are not here. If we follow this discussion to its logical extension, conclusion, I don't think we'll get anywhere. The chair said that there were 4 combinations that did not have consensus. I, myself, think there are even more. Some, after discussion, some of those were resolved, but for Colombia, I would say that if we have numbered table, we could say that number 5, 6, and 7 were not, there was not a consensus. But we can say that there was a discussion here to solve the issue. This is an interim report. It is the discussion in plenary which will lead to a final decision. And then we won't need the asterisks or the square brackets, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we have to remind ourselves what the document is. It's really a report what has been discussed in this working group, and they are putting it up to the Animals Committee now to take a decision on what has to happen. So it doesn't reflect the final conclusion. It is what the working group said they would put forward to the Animals Committee, and therefore, yes, I'm more and more hesitant to have a separation of different cases, because always when it comes into plenary, parties have the possibility to question that conclusion from the working group. I said I would go to Colombia, then United States, then Canada. Thank you.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies for having to take the floor once more. My delegation was perfectly satisfied with the solution that you proposed to separate into two tables and to show those on which a consensus was reached, and so were the recommendations of the working group, and those which had not reached a consensus and were therefore not a recommendation. But I find myself once more obliged to take the floor, Chair, because I've listened to the co-chair of the working group say that decisions were taken on those combinations for species countries on which no consensus was reached. And our objection on this point, on this item, is not about the general discussion on the review of significant trade, but an objection on of a procedural nature, because, as you've said, the document we are discussing is a report, and the only aim of a report is to faithfully reflect what happened in the work within the working group. And for now, that is not the case, Chair, because once more we have the verb recommends used when we couldn't recommend. And there was not a recommendation possible because of the objections of my country and others, but because the chairs of the working group didn't want to enter into the review of marine species because the shark experts were in another room and another meeting on the working group on sharks. But there was no decision taken on those species country combinations, and there was not a final determination on the marine species that you see in the table. So my delegation, whatever the substantial considerations about why some countries have requested not to be included, we cannot be in agreement that a report should reflect it in this way, because it simply doesn't reflect the reality of the working group's work. And as you've said, if in a few years delegates consult this document, they're going to go away with an idea of the deliberations in that working group, and that's incorrect. And that's something which we, at this point, cannot accept. So I would repeat, Chair, for us, it's important that we have reflected that decisions were taken, yes, on the vast majority of these species country combinations you can see here, and that is correct. And that on others, we were unable to take decisions and emit recommendations for whatever reason. And then in the plenary, we can discuss case by case why there are objections or reasons to remove them. But on the form, we can't be flexible, Chair.
Thank you, Colombia. I will come to, I have seen you, WCS. I will come to you. I understand what your concerns are. I'm just hesitant to create a precedent that we create separate tables where it will never be clear, even if we do separate tables, we will never be clear which cases are in which table, where they belong. So I have one, I will put the proposal for a solution on the table, that we have one table, but that we add in the header, noting that consensus was not reached on 4 cases or all cases or some cases, to make sure that we have the table. That's what came out of the working group, and it is noted that there was not consensus on several cases. And then when you want to go back and see what has happened actually, then you have to go to the summary record or of this meeting now, of this session now, and you will see which cases were disputed and how a consensus was reached. Now I give the floor to the United States first and then Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not on the shark species. We had other corrections to this report that do not reflect the discussion adequately, so I don't know if you want me to make those now or you'll deal with this and then, but I hope we can get back to those because there are other things in the report that need to be corrected that do not relate to the species combinations.
I will come back to you on these matters. I saw Canada still wanting to take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And perhaps with your solution, my intervention isn't necessary. I was really just reflecting on the conversation we just had about the presentation of working group reports. And perhaps there is some reflection we need to do about our standard processes, but I don't think we're going to fix the larger question right here, right now. And so to the point being made by Colombia and colleagues on the floor, I understand this to be a working group report, so it's meant to reflect the discussions that occurred at the working group. In our procedures, we focus our working group reports on sort of the final outcome, so we don't provide a lot of the detailed discussion. In this case, given the high sensitivity, I think it is worth putting a point in there that, like you mentioned, Chair, consensus was not achieved or some concerns were raised, or simply that as part of our working group conclusion, the co-chairs of the working group noted that for some issues, the plenary would take up again the points of concern that were raised. That is an accurate reflection of the conversation that we had. It has always been our standard, as following the mandate given by the Animals Committee Chair, to provide recommendations. That's what the working group is asked to do. So maybe we want to reflect on the kinds of verbs we use in future, but I agree with you, Chair, that 2 tables is setting a different path and not exactly reflecting what we discussed. I do think it is important to reflect the concerns of Colombia, but I think maybe perhaps adding a point, or like you suggested, an intro to the chapeau might be more appropriate to reflect the conversations that we had at this meeting. And I will note that, of course, the summary record is this is the time where we're taking decisions, and the summary record should hopefully reflect some of this in-depth discussion that we had, so that we as parties can have the opportunity to consider that and consider if we have a desire to reconsider some of our processes in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I see Colombia and then DRC and then Austria. So Colombia, oh, sorry, I have a member first. So Oceania, you have the floor. And then Europe.
Thank you, Chair. Because it's the plenary that makes the final decision as to what species country combinations are chosen, rather than the working group, I wonder whether just the inclusion of the words after species country combinations, we insert the words remain under consideration for inclusion or be considered for inclusion, either of those options. And so that's highlighting the particular species country combinations that the working group has flagged for consideration by the plenary. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there was consensus for everyone, and that may be a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that's what I may have put into the mandate, to be clear, so that the working group recommends for consideration by the Animals Committee, then it would be clear that it is not a final decision. But I think it would be good to have still a mentioning that consensus could not be reached on all cases presented in that table. Europe?
Thank you very much. I think we are getting to the solution. I would like to warn against modifying the report of the working group in the plenary. Like, there was no discussion on 2 tables in the working group, so I don't really understand how 2 tables could now be reinserted into the working group report. We would be really, I think, going too far. So, but at the same time, we have acknowledged that there was no consensus. It's on 4 species and 6 species country combinations. I don't think we have agreed to name the countries who are disagreeing, so I think the proposal for the way forward by Oceania can be one of the best ways forward. Otherwise, if you want me to name the cases, it was Balearica and Pandinus from DRC. No? Okay, so that's, I think they have been mentioned in the report of my co-chair, but I would really warn against having 2 tables. Thank you.
I don't think it makes sense to note them all. I think because there's no black and white. We have all shades of gray between total agreement and only strong opposition. We also have parties which were not in the room, could not make a comment. So I don't think we have to go there. So the proposal to amend the recommendations by inserting be considered in stage 2 of the review of significant trade, noting that consensus was not reached on all cases. I think that makes sure that it is clear we have not had agreement on all cases in the working group, and that that is finally then the committee to decide on these cases if they are brought up by those parties. So that would be my proposal to Colombia. Colombia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll speak in English to make sure that my meaning is perfectly clear. We can agree with your solution provided that the verb recommends is not included in the working group report, because as I've already said twice, the working group did not recommend those 6 country species combinations. That is factually incorrect, and we cannot accept a working group report that is factually incorrect. Your solution is an elegant solution, Mr. President, but again, in those particular cases, there was no recommendation. I formulated the question twice to the working group presidents and noted the objection of my country and other delegations to there being a recommendation on those 6 country species combinations. And it was very clear to me and to those other delegations that there was no recommendation on those particular ones. So if with your modifications we could say that the working group referred to the Animals Committee the following country species combinations, we would be fine with that. But we cannot agree with the working group report saying recommends, because that is simply not what happened in the working group deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. You know, the problem is that it may be my fault in the end, because I gave the mandate to recommend a limited number. So it may have, but it may be there that the mandate was not clear enough, but the mandate is pretty clear. And that's what we are seeing here now. Yes, Europe, you have the floor.
Can I ask the Secretariat for clarification? I've been to many working groups in the past, and very often there was not a consensus, but the working group then recommends the majority view, because otherwise we would not agree on anything. So is there any need for consensus to make a recommendation, or is it like the majority opinion in the working group?
You know, I think when we said recommends to be considered by the committee, noting that consensus was not reached, I think this is what it reflects pretty well what really is here before us. The working group sends these, and I ask them to recommend, and so it may be my fault in the end. We have had that for a long time, and we always in these groups we have a recommendations, and then parties can go against that recommendation. I see many flags up. I see North America.
Thank you, Chair. I support your last recommendation. I believe that reflects more adequately what happened. You ask us to do recommendation to look for a limited number of cases. Unfortunately, it was not consensus for all of them, and this is as far as we got. And now is the opportunity to open the floor and discuss the table, and then to solve those discrepancies. Thank you.
Okay, I would now ask in that case the members whether they are in agreement to have that wording as I proposed in the working group report. Okay, I see nodding, so so the wording will be in accordance with paragraph 1b of resolution conf 12.8 ref conf COP 18. The working group recommends the following species country combination for inclusion to be considered in stage 2 of the review of significant trade, noting that consensus was not reached on all cases. Yeah. Okay, I think the committee has agreed on that, and I will now close that debate. That's what the committee agreed. I have seen WCS waving for a long time. I wanted first parties to give their views. I will give you quickly the floor. Yes, WCS.
Thank you, Chair. Way up here, it's hard to tell if we're seen. I'll be very brief. There was consensus in the working group on the species to be chosen. There was not consensus, it is correct, on the country combinations because many countries present don't want to be included. So even though we've heard excellent input from the co-chairs, from the US, this is not a penalty, this is a process to help parties. So when you say consensus was not reached, it might seem that the consensus was not reached on the species and taxa. Consensus was indeed reached on that. There's no voting process in a working group, but it was agreed. And the chairs did a brilliant job. So perhaps there could be consideration or reflection that consensus was not reached on some of the country combinations. Consensus was reached on the taxa. And otherwise, we go down a road that future meetings, as long as a country shows up, there's no consensus, they don't want to be included. This is meant to be a scientific and technical process, not a political process. So we just suggest, if not changing the decision you've proposed, but at least a reflection and understanding the lack of consensus was by parties to be included in the process or not on which species or taxa warranted concern. Thank you.
Thank you, WCS. I know I said on all cases, and that is to me a case is a species country combination. It's not denying the species being selected, in my view. I'm not English speaking, but I hope that is That is clear. So if it's still on this, Israel, I think the committee has taken a decision, and I don't want to go on that.
No, I have no objections to the committee's decision. I think the committee's and your way forward is agreeable. Okay. Just 2 points. First of all, I note that within the table as it appears, there are some asterisks on some of the lines, and it's not explained anywhere what those asterisks are. They appear in a couple of places within the table, and so either an explanation of why they are there or they should be removed. That's one point. The second point I would like to make is that we agree with your way forward that this is a reflection, a pure reflection of the working group's discussion. And in the case that this is indeed a reflection of a working group report, then what we discussed an hour ago about removing some lines from the table because of objections of certain parties doesn't seem correct. If we agree that this is a report of the working group, then Pendinus SPP should be back in there. And with the caveat that you just put into the chapeau, then it should, those species combinations should appear as a report of the working group. Of course, the Animals Committee again has the right to then take the table and make whatever determinations, but as an accurate reflection of the working group report, those things should be back in there and not changed here at plenary. Thank you.
Yes, there's a misunderstanding. That's not what we are going to do. It's just that the committee decides that in the final table that the committee will decide they will not appear because they can be taken off. But they will not be taken off the working group report because in the working group they were chosen. So just to clarify that. Sigh, huh? A big sigh. Okay. Okay, and concerning the asterisks, we will make a short foot below the table. It will be added. The asterisk means indicates a non-range state. Just to be clear what that means. I still see Colombia. Colombia, you have the floor for a final word.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and I'm very sorry to have to come back on this, but this is an important procedural point, Mr. President, because what the wording recommends means is that there was a decision taken, and that is also the wording that one of the working group co-chairs used, that there was a decision taken. And if you recall, those that were in the room, with regards to marine species, the co-chair said that we could not look at that and we could not take a decision on those points because the shark experts were not in the room. And my point, Mr. President, is that regardless of if consensus was reached or no consensus was reached, when the working groups and the Animals Committee is going to take a decision that has to be made very clear to those participating in those decision-making processes. Because otherwise, Mr. President, the co-chairs can simply decide what the decisions are. And in that case, then there is no real point to the exchange that was done in the working group and that was very, very interesting and science-based and important in our view, Mr. President. So, as regards to the decision-making process, my delegation cannot simply sit idly by when we are being told that decisions are made simply because the co-chairs from the discussion surmise that a decision has been taken. Decisions, when you take decisions, that has to be made crystal clear to the membership, either of the working group or the Animals Committee. And so when we say recommends, that means that the decision has been taken. And everything in the deliberations of the working group pointed to no decision taken. And in that regards, I understand that the Animals Committee has taken a decision, and we respect that decision, but we would ask that this intervention be recorded in the summary record, Mr. President, and that this precedent is not repeated in other meetings of bodies of the convention. Because if it is up to the co-chairs to decide what decisions were taken, then there is no point for the membership to even be there, Mr. President. In that case, again, we respect the decision. We would have preferred that it's cited that the co-chairs recommend, not that the working group recommends, because as I've said countless times, that is simply not what the factual outcome of the working group was. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. Let me reflect quickly on what you just said. Okay, Colombia, thank you very much for respecting this decision. I think we do have a quite special case at this Animals Committee because we did the deferred decision on some cases to the plenary because the experts were not in the room. But I think we have now taken a decision which somehow covers the concerns, but not all of the concerns that you raise. I understand that, but I think I would like to proceed, and it will be noted, your concerns will be noted in the summary record for sure. Okay, thank you very much. So, with this, I open the floor. Yes, Europe, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would just like to bring a nuance. If my memory is correct, the working group, I don't know whether decide is the right word. We are now getting into politics, but the working group agreed in the morning session to have these country combinations on the review and to forward them. Of course, the working group is always forwarding to the plenary. The working group never decides on what will happen. So in the morning, we have made the list, and there was agreement which was not by unanimity. There were some parties which did not agree, but there was agreement to have these species on the list. But those countries who did not agree committed to bring additional information for the consideration of the working group with the view of possibly being removed from the list. And then in the afternoon, the shark experts were in parallel shark working group. So many parties spoke in the working group indicating that they cannot decide without their experts, but my understanding is that it was decision to revert the decision of the morning. So in fact, it was agreed to pass the issue to the plenary. So I would just, depending on what exactly the statement by Colombia is, I would like to object to having the indication that the working group did not decide. We have made a decision and then we were unable to change it because of the experts not being in the room. So it's yeah, it's more nuanced, but I agree that we now need to move to the real discussion and the real decision here in the plenary. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. So I would now go on to see if we do have different issues. North America flagged that they have some comments on the report. Yeah.
Oh.
United States, please. You have the floor. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a long hour for you. Basically, we found two corrections that we need to see made in the report that it accurately reflects the discussion. And the first one is in relation to Monodon monoceros from Greenland. The text should read that the species had been removed from RST at AC 22 instead of COP 19. Hopefully not a controversial, it's really a correction. The working group did say that. And then the second one is in relation to Saiga Terakara from the Ukraine. The working group requested the Secretariat to follow up with the Ukraine on their use of the source code U, not on the captive breeding facilities. We did discuss the captive breeding facilities because people were concerned how the Ukraine could have Saiga, and we explained they have a captive breeding facility. But the concern in RST was that they had reported trade from unknown sources. Therefore, we suggest replacing the words captive breeding facilities with the words use of source code U, which accurately reflects the discussion in the working group. And we thank Israel for flagging that the footnote needs a footnote for the present asterisk, because we had flagged that one too. And perhaps in the future, we could maybe find some time to see the working group report so we don't have to correct them in plenary. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I have seen Germany and then Israel.
Thank you, Chair. We just have a very minor remark on the table regarding the species Testudo horsefieldii from Uzbekistan. I think the justification for selection in the process was the criterion high volume rather than the criterion endangered species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that correction. I think this is in agreement. Yes, thank you. I see Israel and then Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. In the second part, in the discussion of the species Trionyx triunguus from Ghana, which was in the original table but was removed in the course of the discussions in the working group, it says the working group requested the Secretariat to invite Ghana to present a case study. This is correct, but it was more than that, and we would like to add some words there. After to invite Ghana, we would to provide clarification about the exports from Ghana, and also to present a case study. So there were questions about whether these are juveniles or whether they're adults or why the numbers. So it wasn't just to provide, there was also a recommendation, as we recall, by the working group to get better clarification about the nature of these exports. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. I think I now would give the floor to Indonesia. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving Indonesia the floor. First of all, we would like to request that our statement be recorded at the record. Indonesia would like to align our with the statements and positions made by Colombia. We believe that working group recommendations should be based on consensus, based on Rule 15 of the Rules of Procedures of the Animals Committee. Procedural matters should follow the SC Rules of Procedures. Rules of Procedures applies when necessary to the work of the working groups. If there is no consensus, they should be voted by the committee members. If there was no vote, then there's no decision taken. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Maybe a clarification. In working groups, there is no vote. It's the plenary who may be voting, and then it is the Animals Committee members who may vote. And we really try to avoid this and to have a consensus within the group for any matter.
Thank you, Chair. We totally agree with your position.
Thank you very much. DRC, you have the floor. And then Russian Federation, I will come to you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. I've had my flag up for some time, but I understand that I thought that the priority was to be given to members. My country has been following the discussion on Colombia's comment with great interest, and we would like to support their comments. I thought that the working group's report was supposed to reflect what was actually said and what actually occurred. If there was no consensus, Article 15 of the Rules of Procedure should apply. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Maybe Article 15 refers to the committee and not the working groups. So to be clear about that. I would like to give the floor quickly to the legal team from the Secretariat to make some clarification on the rules. So you have the floor, Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to assist you in these procedural considerations. When you discuss procedural matters, you have the rules of procedure as the main source of guidance for the committee and all the distinguished delegates attending this meeting. Insofar as they are applicable, the rules of procedure shall apply mutatis mutandis to the proceedings of working groups as well. So this is why we advise that you avoid using language like consensus, majority, recommendations, decisions, because these have a certain meaning in an official meeting, and the working group is an official part of the meeting and is put in a record. So if you have this type of questions, please refer to the rules of procedure, because this is what guides your debates. These are the frame that you need to respect when you make decisions and recommendations. And the rule that refers to decisions is Rule 15. Indonesia is right on this. But normally, I think that you are also referring to established practice. So I think that Canada makes a good point as well on we need to find a practical solution and have a serious reflection about how the working groups are functioning when they need to come with this type of agreements that have an impact, a serious impact on the trade and affect countries. Because remember that the heading of this document is compliance review of significant trade, so it's a compliance process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. This all tells me that we will have to be very careful in the future what we ask specifically working groups to do, so that we do not run into any procedural questions and discussions which can last quite a while. Okay. So I take also some blame on me, because I instructed the working groups to do what is written there. I see Central, South America and the Caribbean. You have asked for the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. With the aim of contributing to the discussion and bearing in mind what my colleague from the European Union has said, I would like to propose a text to replace that which appears in the recommendations, which would be as follows. In accordance with paragraph 1b of Resolution Conf 12.8 Rev Cov 18, the working group recommends that the following species-country combinations be presented to plenary to decide if they should be included in stage 2 of the review of significant trade, given that for some of them there was not full consensus in the working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Central, South America and the Caribbean. I think we have already concluded that matter, and it's more or less the same thing as I have proposed, and we have decided. So thank you for your support, but I think we have already concluded along exactly those lines. So thank you very much. So now I would turn to the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, we would like to speak about the proposal to include Muscus mosciferus, which is Siberian musk deer, into the list of species under review. May we proceed with that? Okay. After our initial discussion in the working group, we have checked the factual data on our end, which was reported to the Secretariat in accordance with the provisions of the Convention. For 2019, our data shows that under CITES permits, a total amount of musk deer gland exported from the Russian Federation was just over 322 kilograms. For 2020, our data shows that under CITES permits, a total amount of 332 kilograms were exported as well for the year. That means that in accordance with our data, the criteria of significant growth in trade is not in place. However, in the Annex 2 of the Secretariat and WCMC report, there are numbers that seem to be flawed. For example, the amount of 3,467 kilograms of exported musk in 2020. From the trade database, we understand that this information is coming from one importing party accounts. But the amount seems to be unrealistic in terms of practice, and thus we suppose that it needs to be verified with the site that submitted it. By that we mean that before any further consideration, we deem it necessary to double check this data with the country that has submitted it in order to secure the integrity of the SRT process as a conventional procedure, and not to create necessity to search for counter evidence for false concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Russian Federation. I think I would like to turn to WCMC to have produced that table to maybe give some clarification on the matter. UNEP WCMC, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We have looked into this further, and from looking back at the original annual reports, the value that the Russian Federation delegate mentioned in 2020, which was the highest value in that row, of 3,437.9 kilograms of musk, does appear to be a reporting error by the importer. For one of the shipments within this total, the exporter reported 3,150 grams of musk, and the importer reported a corresponding shipment of 3,150 kilograms. If we correct this to the 3.15 kilograms, this reduces the amount exported in 2020 to roughly 300 kilograms, which would be consistent with the other years. We will look into the additional queries raised by the Russian Federation and update the CITES trade database accordingly where possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UNEP WCMC. In light of this, I think it was Austria who was proposing to include that species country combination in the review. Austria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We are satisfied with these explanations, and we just want to express that proposing a country for this review is not an accusation or any suspicion that there might be something wrong. It's just what the scientific committee of CITES should do to double check if data indicate that there might be something wrong. And in this respect, we want to thank China and Russia for their cooperation in clarifying this issue, and express that we are most satisfied that there was not an unsustainable trade. What is the absolute preferable solution than to detecting that there was illegal or unsustainable trade? Thank you.
Thank you, Austria. So I think the Animals Committee can conclude that in the final table that we will propose that we will exclude this species country combination from the report. Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And just as a final remark, we would like to mention that we noted the interest of Austria and Germany in the approaches to population management of Siberian musk deer, and we will work on making the information on the efforts of our responsible authorities publicly available for the info of all interested parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Russia. I think this is quite a good offer, and it will be an example and will be very interesting to see how you manage this species and the use of that species. So thank you very much for this offer. So I open the floor now for Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. I would like to refer to Svirna Lewini and Svirna Mokaran. During the discussions in the working group, Mexico showed that it has technical scientific information that is robust and sufficient with which we work on NDFs for both of these species. This information is all public. The delegations of Canada and the USA said that they have no concerns about the information from Mexico and that they agreed with the removal of these species from the list. However, as has been already commented here, this was not decided at the meeting because the shark experts were not available, but what we would like to ask is for Mexico to be removed for both these species. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. We have the proposal for Mexico to be removed from the table for both species. I open the floor for support for this proposal or opposition. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So it's not clear if Mexico is removed from Svirna Mokaran, what happens, whether that species is removed from the list altogether. We certainly would like to see the species selected and included in this table. That was what was discussed and agreed to in the working group. We are extremely concerned about the high volume of specimens in international trade, particularly the amount of fins in all three of these shark species. And they all have experienced a sharp increase in international commercial trade over the time period that was examined. Particularly the two hammerhead sharks that are listed in the table have also experienced a sharp increase in trade globally and in several countries. We're extremely concerned that the international trade in these species may be occurring in the absence of robust science-based NDFs. As has been previously noted in the discussion, these species have been included in Appendix 2 for over 10 years, so there has been time for CITES parties engaged in commercial trade of these species to have developed NDFs. We believe the time has come to determine whether specimens of these species are being traded in compliance with the treaty. As we have noted multiple times in the Shark and Ray Working Group discussion and in RST, the United States believes that sharks and rays, given their migratory nature, should be included in the review of significant trade for all countries throughout their range. However, in the spirit of compromise, we have supported the working group's decision to limit the species-country combinations of these shark species to a few select cases for CITES parties with high levels of export or with high increases in commercial trade. However, depending on the outcome of this discussion and whether the great hammerhead would be removed, we would urge that the entire genus of hammerhead sharks be included. We strongly urge our colleagues to join us in supporting the inclusion of these species of sharks in the review of significant trade. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. So just to be clear, Mexico asked to be removed, and would you be in agreement with that proposal as they do have robust NDFs for both species? It's not quite clear because you propose different things. So please, can you clarify?
I think that depends on the outcome of whether that eliminates one of the hammerhead species from the table altogether.
I mean, we are looking at a proposal from the working group which asks us to consider whether the species-country combination Mexico and Sphyrna macaron and the species-country combination Mexico Sphyrna lawini can be removed. If the species-country combination with macaron is removed, then the species is not in the process because there are no other parties being considered in the table. On the other hand, for lawini, there would still be several parties who would be remaining in the table.
Then our proposal would be to include the entire genus of hammerheads.
Thank you. We will come back to that. I see Brazil has asked for the floor.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Mr. Chair. I think that this is the problem when we have two working groups operating at the same time. So we had some people following sharks and some people here. But from the explanation that we got from Mexico and the documentation provided, we're fully satisfied and we would feel comfortable removing Mexico from the list. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if possible, in future occasions, we can try to maybe coordinate better or accommodate the different groups at a different time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. You know, it's difficult if you have 1.5 days and you have 4 or 5 working groups with topics that may overlap. So it's we have tried to at least have a captive breeding and review of significant trade not overlapping where there are many parties having the same concerns. Yes. I see the Maldives. Maldives, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Maldives noted in both the RST and Shark working groups that we were in favor of range-wide reviews of significant trade for highly migratory, critically endangered shark species, such as the oceanic whitetip and scalloped hammerhead sharks. We were, however, willing to compromise to follow a methodology suggested by the United States to assist in meeting your guidance to reduce the total number of combinations selected. As per the draft list established in the RST working group, for these migratory species, we would include all range states that have shown either the highest volume of trade or a sharp increase in trade as laid out in document 14.2, Annex 2 for the scalloped hammerhead and oceanic whitetip sharks. We feel it is inappropriate for countries with extremely high or sharply increasing trade in these species to request removal from the RST process before it has even begun. We reiterate that these are critically endangered species listed on CITES Appendix 2 over a decade. Such high-volume trade in species of acute conservation concern must be analyzed for sustainability under the RST process, especially when the fisheries bodies, such as the IOTC of Maldives, of which the Maldives is a member, typically prohibits their retention. Chair, we can't make quick decisions here based on partial information. If parties reassure us that the significant trade in these critically endangered species is well managed and sustainable, then the RST process should hold no concerns for them, and their involvement will be swiftly concluded. We request that the species country combinations suggested by the RST working group and contained in AC32 COM3 for shark and ray species are retained as per the outcomes of that working group. We fully support the US suggestion, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Maldives. I will come back to Mexico, but I still have some other parties asking for the floor. I see the Netherlands, then Senegal, and then Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time the Netherlands takes the floor, at least in this plenary session, we would like to congratulate the AC Chair on his reappointment and the Vice Chair on his appointment, and take the opportunity to thank the CITES Secretariat for their hard work, as well as the Swiss government for their hospitality on this last day of the meeting. Thank you very much. I would like to reiterate the comment made by the Chair at the start of the meeting that the RST process is not punitive but supportive. I would like to add the word collective. This is the first time that shark and ray species are subject to review of significant trade. Are we looking to find the best way forward? We have 3 workshops in the coming year, at which the making of NDFs for sharks and rays will be addressed, and I think it would be fruitful to see the review of significant trade process as complementary to this. I very much appreciate the work done by Mexico and their willingness and speed at which they have supplied information when requested. We have had a look at the information and are not completely in agreement about the information. We'll need more time. So actually, what I would like to say, we are also concerned about the high levels of trade in Sphena mokoran, and we support the suggestion made by the US that if we decide to remove the species combination, Sphena mokoran and Mexico, we would include the genus level of Sphena. Thank you very much.
Representative from Oceania, you have been asking for the floor. Sorry that I didn't realize that early enough.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it might be useful for this plenary to hear that some of the background in terms of Sphena mokoran was that people who have looked at the table in Doc 14.2, Annex 2, would see that Oman is the key trading nation for this species. However, we had good information at the Sharks Working Group that Oman catch is likely to be misidentified and much more likely to be as Sphena luani rather than mokoran, which means that the numbers in the table and all change considerably in terms of the percentages. And so the percentage attributed to Mexico would then become significantly higher for mokoran. We also noted that these species are critically endangered and under high pressure, high volumes of trade. And my computer screen's gone blank, but I agree with the sentiments of the United States that these species are a very high priority for looking at in the review of sig trade. I'm not quite clear what a genus-wide review would look at in terms of which species, which countries would be included in such a review. And so, yeah, I'm a little bit unclear about that. And can I just say one final thing is that, Mexico has put its NDFs on the CITES website, and so there's no doubt that the non-detriment findings have been done. I'm not a Spanish speaker, and so I don't know how robust that is. And you used the word robust, that there were robust NDFs in place. I would trust that Mexico is likely to have a robust NDF, but unless people can so independently verify that, then I'd leave that open. It's an open question. Thanks. And sorry, just wouldn't assume that because an NDF has been posted on the website by a party that it is necessarily robust.
Yes, of course. I mean, that's what I said initially. So having an NDF does not mean that it is using sustainably a species. That's why we often want to see them. I still have several parties. I have Canada who asked for the floor for a while. So Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the member from Oceania, because that was one of my questions. So as our colleague from Brazil mentioned, there was a discussion on sharks in 2 different working groups, and I saw the data for the Sphyrna macaran, and I understood that the shark working group removed Oman as the main number trader there based on their discussion, so I do appreciate hearing about those discussions. I understand that, therefore, the table changes considerably. I also understand that the sharp increase in particular for that species was likely a result of the Oman reporting, and so I'm still a little uncertain in terms of what those levels of trade indeed look like. I do also have the same question as our colleague from Oceania regarding a genus-wide review in terms of which country combinations we'd be using. I'd seek some more clarification from our colleagues in terms of that so that we can give that some more consideration. With respect to Mexico, so as our colleague from Mexico indicated, Canada is satisfied with the non-detriment finding information that Mexico has provided for some time on the website. Yes, and it is in Spanish, one of the 3 languages of the convention, but we have had the opportunity to review it. We do feel comfortable with the content of it. And so in that regard, we are comfortable removing Mexico for both of these species from the review of significant trade. We agree with the comments that this process is not a punitive process, but a supportive process. In the particular case of Mexico, we're not sure that that support is merited, and that is why we would prefer to concentrate our efforts into some of the other species and into the shark species for some of the other parties that were identified. And as I mentioned, we will take under consideration the point of the US about doing a more genus-wide approach. We would just really like to hear a little bit more about which species country combinations that would entail to help us make a final call on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada, for this comment. Then I would move on to Senegal. Senegal, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you quite rightly said in your earlier comments, a review of significant trade is not punitive on countries. And I think we need to take it in that way. Senegal has been chosen. I was not attending the group, but from a scientific standpoint, there seem to be significant export volumes. And we agreed that Senegal should be on the table for the oceanic shark. And from a sustainability viewpoint, it's important to understand that countries that continue to trade in threatened species, it's hard to understand why they want their name taken away. And the NDFs, are they robust or not? The Animals Committee, if the NDF is on the website, I think it's up to the relevant party to decide whether the NDF is robust or not. We don't want macaran to not be one of the species to be reviewed. I think, should we leave it with the name of Mexico, or as the US and Maldives said, try to include the genus. In terms of similarities between these three species of hammerheads, I think it's important to not exclude Macaran from the list. Perhaps the U.S. Could make further comments about the genus-wide review. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. Then I have Mexico.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking as Mexico, we'd like to thank Brazil, Canada, for their support in removing our country from the list. On our webpage, which is in various languages, you can change it to Dutch or other languages to review the information. And we've shown the last 3 years annual volumes as estimated for all shark species that are listed in CITES. And one can also navigate through the system to see how the quota were used since 2021 through 2022 and 2023. And when volume reaches the 100%, we do not issue any more NDFs, so the administrative authority will not issue any more export permits. The figures are showing how we reach the levels. I can say that for this year, updated information on the up to the 23rd of May, I beg your pardon, says the Speaker. For Sphyrna lewini, we have still got 71% remaining for harvesting on the Pacific coast, and we still have 61.9% left over for Sphyrna Macaran in the Atlantic. So we have controls in place, and the history of the last few years can be seen, and it shows how with scientific committees the volumes were established for each year. This is the information that goes beyond even what is requested in stage 2, and it's available, and I can once more give everyone the link, and it can be consulted in various languages. The 170 permits, they can be requested. There's confidential information there which has to be covered or redacted, but there are documents which are large with technical details showing how we arrive bit by bit to the information. And we can show that we fully meet the CITES provisions in terms of shark exports. And we do not see a reason why Mexico should be on the list. And also Mexico was not listed in Appendix 1. It was included in the Sharks Working Group where our delegation was not present. And that information could have been shared with the experts to avoid this situation. So we would request that both species, our name be removed, our country be removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. Now Indonesia and then DRC, and then I will have to think a bit. So Indonesia, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. In our shark Sphyrna lewini, in line with Mexico, Indonesia would like to request that Indonesia also be excluded from the list, since we only have reached 3% of the global trade, below the 10% CITES global trade threshold practice, and also below the Mexico number. If not reaching the threshold, will also make us to be included into the list. What's the point of having the 10% threshold? We would like also avoid making precedents that might be not in compliance with the agreed rules and practice of this committee. In addition, we would like to inform this committee that Indonesia has made its NDF and that Indonesia has reached sustainable harvest level for Sphyrna lewini. Thank you, Chair and colleagues.
Thank you, Indonesia. It is well noted. We will come back to that case. We are still looking at the case of Mexico, but we will come back to your case whenever we have finished here, okay? So we have Portugal. No, DRC, I had DRC first, sorry. DRC, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de la parole.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Chair. We've been listening very carefully to the statements by Mexico on Luini and Mocaran. My country would like Mexico's suggestion to withdraw these species to be considered. Why, when there's a non-detriment finding, which sets that the trade is sustainable and that countries are cooperating, there's no threat of significant trade, even though the volume has increased, if the trade is sustainable. And Mexico's explanations were very clear. So we support the idea of removing Luini and Mocaran for Mexico, and I'll come back again when we get to Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have Portugal now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being the first intervention in the plenary, we want to salute you for your ruling of this committee, and to salute also your vice chair, the organizing country, and the secretariat, and all the members of the committee. Regarding this issue, and for a matter of equity, we believe it's not so fair to withdraw or delete from the RST processes the country species combinations for countries that are present here, when those that are not present cannot present their so-called defense, if you may say, not questioning the quality of the information and all the documents that several countries are saying they have presented, that I perfectly believe, and in the quality of those documents. It doesn't look so fair that other countries cannot defend themselves, so they will be in the process. It's not a problem to be in the RST. It's only a matter of information and clarification of the sustainable use of all the species. So I believe there is no problem for a country to present their data that have in abundance in some cases. Considering this, and I just wanted to support the intervention made some time ago by the Netherlands, and propose that the genus Fauna will be included in its totality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Portugal. I see Germany and then France.
Thank you, Chair. We would align ourselves with the comments made by the Netherlands, the US, and others on including the hammerhead sharks on a genus level or any kind of higher taxonomic level for this review, particularly as there seems to be significant confusion about what is included in this trade. However, we think that the trade is significant for the genus. Also, since we have heard that there is information available, which this group so far couldn't really review in depth to see whether those NDFs are actually providing the necessary data, we also see significant merit in having the significant trade review look into this data on a higher level and compare what we could find in those documents. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. France, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to make a long speech because we've been on this item for a long time. Just to say that France agrees with the Netherlands, the Maldives, the United States, Germany, and Portugal on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Japan asking for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We see the intense discussion on
whether we should go forward to review the general-wide review for the significant trade. But I share some sympathy on that point, but at the same time, we need to go back to the resolution conference number 12.8, which designate how we should go forward for the review of the significant trade, where the species-specific species and countries combination are clearly described. So otherwise, we would have a significant confusion along the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. Austria, you have the floor.
I'll try to make it short. Given the complexity of analyzing shark NDFs and the necessity to consider the whole offtake from a shared stock, I think it is preferable to leave Mexico for the moment in the process. And given the comprehensive list, they have told us that they have all data. It should be very easy for them to complete the process in the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Austria. And I have Asia.
Thank you, Chair. In line with the comment from our colleague from the Mexico committee, the NDF is one of the important items that we need to be considered in evaluating the process of the trade. There are many other species that traded a high volume without NDFs, and it must be got the priority. So with Asia, we think that the species that have already NDF should be removed from the list of the review. Thanks.
Thank you, Asia. Now, give me a moment. Well, first, I would like to see WWF take the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your patience on this item. We seem to be repeating some of the type of discussions that we had in the Plants Committee, and it's getting rather worrying that at this stage we're being asked to make decisions on the fly about certain countries being excluded on the basis of NDFs that we haven't had a chance to evaluate it. I must respectfully disagree with Asia that the mere presence of an NDF is not sufficient to warrant exclusion from the process. Would also agree with Portugal that some of the countries that have been identified in the species country combinations aren't here. The selection isn't perfect, and privately we might have sympathy for some of the countries that are in the selection. Equally, though, we'd also agree with Maldives that we would have preferred a basin-wide approach in the first place. But we would make a plea at this stage, please proceed with what we have. We're being asked to make decisions now that we really should be making in the first phase of the review, and we haven't had the chance to really evaluate the evidence properly. So I would say please go with what we have and consider that as a comment on the Mexican case and on all the others, and then I promise I won't take the floor again. Thank you.
Thank you, WWF. I have to look at that again. Florida University International, and then I will have to make some thoughts.
Thank you, Chair. Florida International is giving this intervention on behalf of Wildlife Conservation Society, Humane Society International, Bloom Association, I4, Blue Resources Trust, Save Our Seas Foundation, Shark Advocates International, Shark Trust, and Defenders of Wildlife. We thank the Parties and Animals Committee members for their productive discussions and debate around the selection of Appendix 2 listed shark and ray species country combinations for the review of significant trade process. Sharks and rays are the second most threatened vertebrate taxa globally. Further, after nearly a decade since their inclusion on Appendix 2, this is the first time that any shark or ray species have been considered for the review of significant trade, and it marks a pivotal moment for the Convention. For highly migratory species like sharks that form shared stocks between multiple parties, the Shark Working Group agreed that it might be more appropriate to conduct range or ocean-wide and higher taxon combinations, as frustratingly sharks do not appreciate our political boundaries, and reporting, misidentification, and misreporting frequently occur at genus level. Additionally, the discussions in the Shark Working Group noted not including any RST by genus provides parties with an incentive to not report or only report at higher taxonomic level in order to avoid entering the RST in the future. However, we note the Chair's suggestions on limiting the total number of country and species combinations, wholeheartedly support the suggestion from the United States to at a minimum include, along with those trading at the highest volumes, all parties indicating that they have a sharp increase in the volumes of trade that were highlighted in the analysis provided in document 14.2. The country and species combinations agreed in the RST working group and included in AC 32.3 should be included in their entirety. Simply put, in sharks, we do not have the luxury of time to wait. Additional publicly available data sets and studies in peer-reviewed scientific literature indicate that substantial volumes of oceanic whitetip and scallop hammerhead shark fins in international trade continue despite their listing on CITES. The continued presence of these species identified in seizures of non-compliant trade made by CITES parties, most notably from the Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong, highlight the severity of the situation for these species. We regret attempts by parties to exclude themselves from the RST process before it has run its course, especially given that some of those parties have recently encountered significant challenges in meeting their obligations under CITES. Parties that are confident in their robust NDFs and the sustainability of their trade should have no concern about going through the RST process, as they will be promptly removed. It is concerning that some of the same parties are repeatedly indicated as exporters of non-compliant trade. It is important for us to therefore verify that their trade is indeed legal and sustainable. Our organizations remain committed to assisting parties in capacity building, including the development of NDFs and providing identification tools. We therefore suggest that all of the parties and species combinations that were suggested in the Shark Working Group be included. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just a short question to the United States. When you suggest to include the whole genus Sphyrna in the process, that would entail, if I see correctly, for what parties and species data is available, about 40 species country combinations. So I wonder what your comments on that are.
Thank you, Chair. At this point, because we are restricted to a smaller number of parties, we would suggest those that are in the table for Sphyrna lewini would be included for the review of significant trade at the genus level.
Okay, so you're saying those parties that are still on the list when we remove Mexico, Mocoran, would then be subject to a review for the whole genus?
Yes, Chair.
So, United States, if I understand correctly, you are proposing that for the countries Indonesia, China, Kenya, Nicaragua, Sri Lanka, and Yemen, they provide information on trade in all Sphyrna species, but including those that have been adopted at COP19, or only the ones that are already for quite a while in the appendices?
Thank you, Chair. The 3 that were listed originally, so not the most recent ones. And that list is correct. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question I would ask the members of the committee to consider is whether you are of the view that Mexico can be removed from the process of review of significant trade for Mexico for the species Sphyrna levini and Sphyrna mokoran. That's the first question we have to answer. And the second question will then be, do you agree to instead then have a genus-wide review for the remaining party species combinations, noting that this would be about 18 species country combinations? That will be the second question. So first, we go back to the case of Mexico, and I would like to hear your views from the committee on that matter. Whether you are of the view that Mexico can be removed from the process, is not included into the process for Sphyrna levini and Sphyrna mokaran. Oceania, you have.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've heard, the arguments, and that Mexico has had these NDFs on the website for several years, and I appreciate that they've shared their NDFs. In terms of equity across parties, though, I think the point that Portugal made, that parties that are not in the room don't have the opportunity to exit at this stage. And we also heard from Netherlands, I believe, that they had question marks over the NDFs. We heard from Canada that they supported the NDFs and thought they were robust. And so my feeling is that we retain Mexico in the process at this stage, that it looks like they'll exit really quickly, rather than go into the detailed stage thereafter. So I would prefer that they stay in at this point, and expecting a rapid exit. But just in terms of fairness across the board, I think that's the way to go.
Thank you, Oceania. I see Europe has asked for the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to echo what Oceania did, and in particular for Sphyrna mokaran, where this country species combination was highlighted by the sharks working group, and we would not want to lose the species from the radar. So indeed, as you said, this is not a punitive process, and if there is more time for consideration of the information, hopefully Mexico can exit quickly the review. But for the time being, it would be useful to have these species reviewed. And I also understand the concern about workload for having 18 country species combinations. So while it might have been better to have a different approach for shark, it has not yet been discussed. So I think that's an idea for future meetings to see how to approach reviews of shark species, but I don't know whether we are there yet and whether that would be manageable and not at the cost of quality of these reviews. Thank you.
Central, South America and the Caribbean, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. My region aligns itself with what we heard from Oceania, that we consider that it would be good to maintain Mexico in this review. And we also agree that it will very easily be able to report all the data that they have available. Thank you.
Thank you. Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We believe from the African region that for purposes of equity, as has been pointed out, that since Mexico has been identified and the various reasons given by other members of the committee we would support maintenance of Mexico on the list until such a time as they produce the necessary information for them to exit the process. Thank you.
North America, you have the floor.
As you heard from our colleagues in the region, we agree with for the non-inclusion of Mexico. You heard Canada's views and also the US and Mexico points. yes, as North America. But as Mexico, the information is there already. Thank you.
Thank you, North America. So my sense of the committee is that we retain these two species for Mexico in the process, as we consider that it is just a letter exchange, and then we will have the NDFs which are already publicly available to look at, and that will be it, which is, well, yeah. But that's the decision that the committee is supporting, and that's how we go about it. Now I'm turning to the United States. They said if that species combination is removed, then they would want to have the whole genus. So what now, United States?
Chair, we agree with your suggestion. We're comfortable with the committee's determination.
Thank you. We still have in Indonesia to look at. So based on that is the decision taken by the committee on that matter. I will now turn to Indonesia concerning their case.
Thank you, Chair, for giving Indonesia the floor. Again, on our shark, Cyperna lewini, Indonesia would like to request that Indonesia be excluded from the list. We only have reached 2% of global trade, below the 10% practice, and we have submitted our NDF. It is published, and we have reached a sustainable harvest level for this species. We are open to talk about the numbers of our NDF right now, because that's the purpose of our meeting. We need consistency under this committee. Otherwise, this committee will have no legal and no practice certainties in its operations. We would like this committee to comply with these agreed rules and practices. Again, Indonesia has submitted our NDF, and we believe the delegates coming to this meeting should have read and studied all the NDF under discussion and submitted by all parties before attending this meeting. If some delegates fail to read and study the NDF submitted in good faith by parties, it should not be the problem of such good faith parties. Again, we would like to seek your support on this matter, colleagues. Thank you, Chair, colleagues. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Indonesia. You have heard the proposal of Indonesia not to be included into the process for Cyperna lewini. We have DRC. DRC, you have the floor, and I will come. I think you are on something else. Yes. DRC.
Thank you, Chairman. I did want to take the floor here in support of Indonesia. We read the WCMC document on trade statistics for Sphyrna lewini for Indonesia, where there's an NDF. You said that this process is not punitive, it's a conservation effort and measure. But even in the working group, it was agreed that under 10% in global trade, significant trade could not be ruled out. So there's an NDF with scientific explanations for the experts, and my country supports the withdrawal of Indonesia and the species for Indonesia from this document. Thank you.
Thank you, DRC. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States respectfully disagrees with Indonesia. We've heard much discussion of fairness and integrity of the RST process, and for the same, the committee made the decision to retain Mexico that said they had a very robust NDF. We would ask the same decision be extended to Indonesia. We feel that simply stating that you have an NDF does not mean you've met the requirements of this stage of review in RST. I stress the word review, that parties and experts have the time to review that NDF, and the NDF, you have one, and you're removed from RST, that's incredible good news, and gives faith and confidence in the trade that you're doing, that it's sustainable. And so therefore, we ask for the respect of the process and the courtesy that we treat Indonesia as fairly as we treated, the committee made the decision for Mexico. And therefore, we ask that Indonesia be retained. It wasn't just the high that they didn't, that yes, the trade was less than 10%, but they were put there because those countries showed a sharp increase in them, a spike in the trade. And so the other countries are there. Kenya's not here to speak. We feel Indonesia should be retained.
Thank you, United States. Then I have Mexico.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few reflections. We've been hearing about procedures continually. Whilst we know that Mexico may and could exit rapidly from the review, we don't think that is the question at hand here, whether we manage to exit rapidly or not. Japan, Colombia, Indonesia, and the DRC have commented on this, that the process we are following here is set out in a resolution 12.8, and that resolution follows the principles of transparency, timeliness, simplicity, and that when we think of parties that are meeting the resolution, so in this case, selecting the number of species country combinations by a group where we're not participating, and then trying to provide information to the group and then we're not able to, well, that doesn't give us certainty. So in this case, Mexico can accept entering into this exercise, although we're not in agreement. We would like to express that for future processes, we will need to adjust to the rules of procedure, which are set out and very clear in Resolution 12.8. All the volumes were backed up with strong data and strong and high standards, And we've also responded to notifications to the parties. When a notification is issued, the parties have every right to request information, and we always reply. So all of these processes are not being considered. So it's not a matter of whether we can exit quickly or not, but it's a matter of meeting and fulfilling the procedures in the resolution 12.8. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico, for your comments. I then have Senegal, followed by China, Canada, and Brazil, and then I will come back to France. You are getting a tired arm. I know you will be saying something. I will get back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think that, like for Mexico, which was kept in by the Animals Committee, for reasons of ethics, I think that today there are countries that are not in attendance. Kenya and other countries cannot have their say here. If we only choose the countries that are here and can defend themselves, then I don't think we can talk about complete information. The information has to be assessed. The NDFs need to be assessed. When you have all the necessary information in the next stage, why should we withdraw these now? So I think that Indonesia should stay on the list, the same as Mexico. That's really what needs to be done. The second proposal, the genus proposal, I think has already been dealt with. The countries that are in the list need to stay in the list. It's a matter of equity and fairness. These countries are on the list. The available information then needs to be provided to the Secretariat. And I think it will be extremely easy for these countries to justify themselves with solid information, robust NDFs. They will have no problem proving their case, and it will not be necessary to go any further with the review. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I have China now.
Thank you, Chair. China heard various comments from parties and observing organizations on the RST combination related to sharks. China understands there are parties suggested to have an RST to review full states, and now there is a proposal to have a genus and country combination. First, China believes that RST shall be species and country combinations to ensure effective implementation and not to overburden country that has never exported other species in the genus. China would like to voice our support to the original RST selection as proposed in the RST working group, while China has no strong opinion whether or not to include Mexico. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. Then Canada and Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. And so thank you. I understand that the Animals Committee has made the decision to include Mexico for both of the Sphyrna species. And I understand that the Animals Committee is contemplating, therefore, not taking the genus-wide approach. Canada would have supported the genus-wide approach. We would have had some questions about the inclusion of Oman in that situation, but we understand that that decision has been taken, and we respect the ruling of the Animals Committee. Regarding Indonesia, we would suggest retaining Indonesian and indeed retaining all of the species country combinations that are identified in the COM document. Again, unlike with Mexico, we have not had the chance to review the NDF and would appreciate doing so via this significant trade process. Finally, Chair, we just wanted to comment on some of the points being raised about the percent trade. So it is our understanding that in the review of significant trade, there is no rule or procedure regarding the percentage of trade that requires an indication of inclusion in the review of significant trade. For some species, low levels of trade can still be quite significant if they're not suitably supported by a non-detriment finding. Population sizes can vary between countries for some species. There's a number of reasons why percentage of the total global trade for us is not a rationale for inclusion or exclusion, but rather one aspect of a decision-making process. I believe in this case, the percent trade was used simply as a tool for trying to address your concern, Chair, of having a limited number of species-country combinations, but I do not believe it to be a procedural aspect of the review of significant trade decision-making, and for that reason, we again continue to support the inclusion of all of the species-country combinations identified in the COMDOC for these two hammerhead species at this point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Canada, I think in relation to the percentage point, I totally agree with you. We don't have anywhere a threshold fixed for that process. So Brazil, and then I will go to France. So Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. And just to keep consistency with our position, just in the case of Mexico, we're also satisfied with the information provided by Indonesia. So we would be comfortable excluding them from the list. Although we do find the US proposal on the genus analysis interesting, and we would like to talk to them later on maybe. I think that at this point it would not be ideal to open or reopen that discussion, but the proposal does sound interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brazil. And now France, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, contrary to habit, I'm going to speak on behalf of France, but also my German neighbors here in the room. We have agreed on a shared statement in order to save time on the principle of equality, but also because we share a global stock, which is mainly in international waters. I'm talking about this one species. We think it's important to keep the initial list of countries on the first list. We'd also like to recall something that was said quickly by Canada earlier. On the initial list for Mokaran, Oman was one of the countries, and Oman said we don't fish this species, it's Lewini. They were not put on the list for Lewini, and this raises a lot of questions for us still. And once again, on the principle of equality, we would like to see Oman's name in the list for Sphyrna lewini. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. So with this, I'm again turning to the members of the committee. We have Indonesia, who asks to be not included into the process for Sphyrna lewini. We have heard quite some support. We also have heard that in relation to the decision just taken for Mexico, it would be equitable also to take the same decision. So we have had heard various views. Now I'm turning to the committee to see what your views are on this matter so that we can proceed. So Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would propose that we retain Indonesia in the significant review of significant trade at this stage, and that would give people an opportunity to look at the non-detriment finding that I gather was posted on the website this week. So it's great that that's been done, but I think in terms of equity, I agree with Canada that we should treat all 7 parties listed in this table equitably and retain them all in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania. Central, South America and the Caribbean.
Sí, nosotros, gracias.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we align ourselves with the statement. The interpreter apologized, we didn't hear which country he aligned with. My apologies.
Oh, you align yourself with Oceania, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
North America, you have the floor.
Yeah, we also align to have a equitable treatment.
Okay, I see heads nodding, so I think that will be the decision of the committee to retain Indonesia in the selection on that species. You know, I think the points raised about having now a lot of data for all those hammerhead species for several years. I mean, if we want to have a review of significant trade for all those parties and species concerned, that just overgrows the capacity of the Secretariat to do that. So you might want to think about a different way how this could be tackled by a decision to have a study on that, whatever for the upcoming COP. But I think that just the sheer amount of work just overgrows what the Secretariat with its limited sources can really do. So you might want to think to have a different process to go about that, because I think it is important to look at trade in sharks now that we do have data on a quite large scale and for a long time. But I don't think that we can just fill the whole this process we are looking at now. Okay. That was just a general comment. Now I think I have Colombia asking for the floor. Colombia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to make a statement on Carcharodonus longimanus, if we may. On this review of significant trade, as you explained, this should not be seen as a punitive mechanism, but one which works for the sustainable use of the animals and plants. So we support all the recommendations that are made during this process, always when they are based on technical and scientific information, which is robust and which follows the principles and provisions in the annexes of Resolution Conf 12.8. So it's in this context that we do not agree with the recommendation to maintain the species country combination of Carcharodonus longimanus for Colombia. As we've said in the past, in accordance with our regulations in force since 2021, sharks, chimera, rays and chimera changed, and now there is a ban on trade in the whole national territory, including in abroad as well, and any sub-product derived from said species. And in accordance with the Conf 12.8 on the conservation and management of sharks, where parties are invited to encourage to share information on fisheries and sharks, and in particular the zero export quota or the ban of trade, Colombia will proceed to inform the Secretariat to notify countries on this stricter internal measure that we have adopted. So, as a consequence, since 2021, there is no legal trade of these species or of subproducts derived from Colombia. So, including the species country combination for Carcharodonus longimanus in Colombia would not make sense, since we have set out, and as set out in 12.8, it's a review of the legal trade of a species, and there is no legal trade in Colombia. And the criteria of said trade is not part of what happens in Colombia. and it's based on isolated and unverified data, and which goes against what we have set out for this species. So we would like to request that this species country combination for Colombia be removed from the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. And I mean, if you have national legislation banning the trade in that species, and if we will notify this to the Secretariat, I think that is quite a good reason not to retain that species country combination in the process, because there is no more trade going on that species. So I'm looking for comments on this. I see Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And I agree with your comments that we've got national bans have been put in place since the reporting period that we've been looking at. Then I believe that Colombia doesn't meet the criteria to go into this process. I just want to make sure that when they do make that information available to the Secretariat, that the Secretariat makes that available to other parties through a notification to the parties or some other system, so that we know that, say, New Zealand shouldn't be importing any shark products from Colombia. Thank you.
I see Colombia nodding, so I think that will be the way to go, yes. I see Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We would agree with removing Colombia from the list. It seems that the information provided is clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. And I see Europe.
Thank you very much. I just wonder whether we should not adopt the same approach as for the other cases where we have removed countries. So invite the Secretariat and the Chair to possibly review any NDF in the future. You know, if the zero quotas would be removed or changed, or is that a different case procedurally? Maybe we should clarify on that.
Well, it's not quite the same thing. It's a national ban on harvesting. It's not a zero quota. It's a national ban. So this is not the same thing. Okay. Yes, Central, South America, and the Caribbean.
The region would like to support that which was expressed by Colombia. There is no sense that Colombia remain in this review. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have I see you, Brazil. If you are in support, please be short, then I can just close the case. Brazil?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's exactly to support. I mean, if trade is forbidden, then it doesn't make sense to have a review on trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. So I think we can safely conclude that the species country combinations Sphyrna lewini and Casuarinus, Longimanus, and Colombia are not included into the process. Okay, just to be clear that it is on the record that Colombia will inform the Secretariat about national ban, including to ask the Secretariat to issue a notification on that matter, so that it is perfectly clear. We did have, we still have something open, I think Canada, but also France mentioned to include Oman in the list of country species combinations. I would like to come quickly back to this because you mentioned it amongst other things. So Canada, can you please say something more on that?
Thank you, Chair. And so when we were discussing at the beginning, when we started a discussion, when the U.S. introduced a discussion on a genus-wide review, we also heard that Oman had been removed for the I forget the second ones. Macarena, thank you, because of a reporting error where in fact they were trading in 2 other species of hammerheads. And so understanding that logic, we had the question about the inclusion of Oman, first of all, if we did a genus-wide review, but if not, for Sphyrna lewini, and we don't know if that was discussed in the shark working group, as I wasn't present there. But we do have a question about if you're looking at Sphyrna lewini trade, whether or not it would be beneficial to also include Oman in that, as in the same way that the Macarena numbers are not quite reflective, the Lewini numbers wouldn't be reflective either because of that misreporting. So that is a suggestion that we were pondering throughout the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Before turning to the chair of the shark working group on that matter, I would like to ask the interpreters if we can add a couple of minutes to finish this item.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Very much. So, Oceania, you have the floor.
Yes, at the Sharks Working Group meeting, we discussed the presence of Mokaran in Oman trade figures, and we thought that was misidentification. We didn't actually then look to see what would happen if that was applied to lewini, which is the most likely alternative species that's being misidentified. I noticed that Oman currently is 6.4% of the trade of lewini, which would be higher than that because we've removed 17,000 kilograms of meat that was misreported. So I know there is no threshold, but they are a significant trader of these hammerhead sharks. So if we can include them in this review at this stage, then I would support that.
Okay, I think this would make sense, but I need to have some more comments from the floor. If they are of the view that Sphyrna lewini and Oman would merit inclusion in the process, but are we sure that it is then Sphyrna lewini that is being traded and reported?
That could be a useful part of the review process, is to determine exactly what is being misreported as what.
Okay. I see the nomenclature specialist.
Thank you, Chair. I fully endorse the comments by Canada and my Oceania colleague about the desirability of including Oman in the review for Sphyrna lewini. I also note that Oman is already captured in the Carcharinus longimanus review. Therefore, I hope that the reporting and communication burden with the Secretariat is minimal in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I see any opposition to this proposal? I don't, so we have one down and one up. But that's okay. I see Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm proposing another down, and that's, I don't believe that the Holothuria nobilis should be included in the review of trade at this stage. It was certainly the Holothuria genus is in trouble, and that was appropriately recognized at COP18. However, there was an entry delay of 12 months, so it didn't come into force until 28th of August of 2020. And therefore, the trade figures that we were looking at suddenly showed this sudden increase in levels of trade because it had not been reported through the CITES database up until 2020. And so, obviously, there's a rapid increase. So I believe it's too soon to carry out a review of sig trade for that species. But also, one of the factors that influenced the working group here, review of sig trade working group, was that they had asterisks against both Indonesia and Yemen. On the basis that was indicating that these were non-range states, and therefore that raised a question mark. I've looked at the IUCN Red List assessment for that species, and nobilis is native to Indonesia and Yemen. The list of parties where it occurs in the IUCN Red List assessment is considerably larger than what we have in our UNEP WCMC list. So hopefully those two lists can talk to one another a bit better. But yeah, so they are native to those two parties, and therefore I think should be excluded from the review at this stage, maybe next time round.
Thank you. I think I tend to agree. If we have trade data for 2 years, when it's just started, it's obvious that there's a sharp increase from zero trade to the trade reported. So I would tend to support your suggestion. Do I see anybody commenting on this? Asia, you have the floor.
In line with the comment from the Oceania, I agree with it.
Thank you for that support. I see Austria. Austria, you have the floor.
We would request that it is checked. As far as I remember, the review was not only indicating a sharp increase, but also a high volume. And the high volume is a threatening factor, independent for how long it is.
I give the floor to Oceania, who has been dealing with this.
Yes, I believe that with nobilis, high volume was not one of the factors. It was for Holothuria whitmei, that was the other one, which was a contender at that stage. So it doesn't apply to nobilis.
Thank you, Oceania. Yes, Austria?
As it was a compromise solution of the working group to have just one of the species in the review process, would it then not be logical to keep whitmei instead, if that is the argument?
Oh, well, I wasn't in that discussion, so it's pretty hard for me, for me to respond there. I see Indonesia has asked for the floor. Oh, and then Japan.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank committee members and parties for not proposing not to include us for this species. We agree that the data is only for 1 year. So because we were included in Appendix 2 in 2019 with reservations, and we only have 2022 as the data to establish a statistical trend, and we don't think this is enough to establish data. So again, we would like to kindly request that this species is excluded. Thank you, Chair, colleagues.
Thank you, Indonesia. I give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to support the views from the Oceania. As we already indicated in the plenary, it is too soon to review this species. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a majority in support of the proposal from Oceania. Oh, I see France. France, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to support what Austria has said. It was also the high volumes that were a concern. And if in the volumes expressed for the Holothuria, we need to remember that these are they are dried, and so 10 times lower than fresh biomass. These are species which are highly endangered and mainly due to overfishing for export and international trade, because these species have no natural predators in the wild. Coming back to the proposal by Austria, which is to go with Whitmay rather than nobilis. This would involve France in the review, and therefore I'd like to remind you of our position, which we stated during the working group, which was that France will bow to the wisdom of the other parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. I see North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The North American region supports the proposal by Oceania.
Thank you. Europe?
Thank you very much.
No. The microphone.
Thank you very much. I wanted to confirm what Austria, I think, said, that the feeling in the working group was that it would be good to have at least one species in the review, and so probably if Whitmay is seen as the better option, that could be the outcome, but I have not heard so much support today in the plenary to include in that species, so maybe we can still hear a few more parties on that. Thank you.
One problem we would be having is that it is then not clear which parties, because there are quite some parties, if I see correctly, which are trading, or it would be then be 4 parties.
I think it would be 4 parties, because I think the original proposal was to have parties trading more than 10%, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah.
Okay.
It would be more than for the other species.
Okay, so I see DRC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The DRC would simply like to say a word about Holothuria nobilis. I think it's a bit premature to make this decision. I would like to support the position stated by Indonesia. We don't have enough data. So I would align myself with those comments. Thank you.
So thank you, DRC. I think we have a majority view in the room that it may be premature to include one of these species. So in 3 years, this may be different if we have a better set of data. So I would conclude that the Animals Committee is in support of the proposal from the Oceania region to not retain Holothuria nobilis for Indonesia and Yemen in the process of significant trade review. Okay, do we have any other issues on document AC32 DocCom 3? If not, then we will adopt this document with the as amended, and for the conclusions of the Animals Committee, I think I will come back after lunch to say exactly what the conclusions of the Animals Committee will be, because we have several things now that I have to pull together, and I don't want to keep you from lunch and the interpreters also from a merited rest. So we will reconvene in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. Indonesia?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for the latest decision on our sea cucumber. It's easier to say sea cucumber than the term. We'd like to ask the status of our Linguina, Mr. Chair, Linguini, because
yes,
for our Linguini, we also have only 1 year of data. It's similar with our sea cucumber, only 1 year of data. So, and again, we would like to convey that we are ready to discuss even our NDF, and we would like to seek seek your indulgence. That this is the same situation with our sea cucumber. Only 1 year of data. So for consistency and certainty and fairness, we would like to request that our shark, Superni lewini, would also be excluded from the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. It's not quite the same thing. I mean, the holoturians, they were listed just 3 years ago, and then with the delay of implementation, so we only have 2 years of trade data. But Lewini has been on the appendices for many more years, and there has been trade going on. So that's not quite the same situation, and I think the committee has decided on this species country combination to be retained. So we already have made a decision on that matter. So with this, I would close the debate and we reconvene at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.